Welcome to another edition of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I am your host, Tommy Maloney. Thanks for coming by. And you're probably saying, hey, Tommy, this is my first time coming by. What's this Blending the Family podcast all about? I'm glad you asked. And thanks for coming by. What are you doing right now, by the way? Are you on a jog? Are you walking the giraffe? Are you going cross country to Mars? See the rover landed? That is so cool. So cool. I love science. Anyway, I digress. I'd rather be digesting, but I'm digressing. Blending the Family is a podcast about topics such as what is a good wine on a first date after you've gone through a divorce, you've figured out who you are, you figure out what you want to become, and now you're back on the dating scene and you want to go and you have that date and you don't know what kind of wine to choose. Pinot Noir. That's the secret. According to my man Bruce. Check that episode out. We've also talked about technology, co-parenting apps. We've had guests on this podcast talk about how to get over failure. Those are just some of the topics we've talked about on this podcast. Again, I'm your host, Tommy Maloney, and I normally would say, well, I normally I would be coming from one of two places. Either I'd be recording this podcast on the road, as I have, like a lot of you, many of you, still have a day job, or as I like to call them, my silent partner. Or I'd be recording this from my home office. Now, I'm actually recording this at home, but in my wife's home office. I'm having computer problems. And so the only way I can access the World Wide Web is in her office, because her office has the, as we like to call in the tech world, the wire. So I can plug it into my laptop. I can't use Wi-Fi right now until I get a new either a new network card or a new laptop. Chances are I might be getting a new laptop. Shh. Don't worry, my wife already knows. So you're doing good. I'm hoping that you're surviving this polar vortex. You're surviving the new year. You're surviving day to day. Maybe you went from working in an office, now you're working from home and your kids are driving you nuts. Or in my situation, I'm actually off at the recording. I'm off this week, and so I've been spending a lot of quality time with our dog Otis, and he's been driving me a little batty. Very needy dog, which, you know what, I'll take that. I love it. I'm so grateful that we have Otis. And if you'd listened to previous older podcasts, you might have heard our chocolate lab, who is in doggy heaven. I know he's in doggy heaven. That was Duke. On this episode, you'll actually hear Otis barking in the background. And I am okay with that. This is part of what we do, what I do. On this episode, actually, let me turn my pages if you're probably hearing that. On this episode, Rich Cohen, author. Oh my gosh, I learned so much about who Rich Cohen is. I don't know if you were a fan of this show on HBO called Vinyl. I love that show. I was addicted to that show. But Rich was the creator of that show on HBO Vinyl. So check that out. Rich Cohen has a new book out called Pee-wee's Confessions of a Hockey Parent. And I know you're probably rolling your eyes. Oh, Tommy, we're going to talk hockey. Yes, we're going to talk hockey. Here's something else I found out about Rich. We came from the same area of Illinois, the burbs of Illinois. And I heard somebody the other day say, oh, you don't pronounce the S? I'm like, I really want to just, no, you don't pronounce the S in Illinois. But Rich was kind of, I mean, my gosh, he's like a major author, writer. He is doing what I want to be doing. Besides this podcast, I just want to be a full-time writer, full-time podcaster, and it was so cool talking with Rich. And his book talks about youth hockey and talks about how the when it comes to youth hockey players trying out and this is me saying it, what a scam. And I would love to hear from you if your kids are in other sports, if it's the same. I can only talk about, I'm trying to think, Connor plays or played high school baseball. Everybody made the team there. He played in junior high. I think he did 1 year of basketball. But I'm curious about other youth sports. If when it comes to tryouts, if it's and Rich talks about this. If you ever saw the movie Miracle, Herb Brooks, day one of the tryouts, already had his team picked. I've experienced that with my own son. Have you experienced, what am I trying to say? Teams are already picked because, maybe the kid's parents have a lot of money, so therefore that kid's going to be picked no matter what talent they have. Or, it's the coach's kid, so they automatically get picked. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that. But as I said, Rich Cohen, author of the new book, Pee-wee's Confessions of a Hockey Parent. Some of the things we talked about are, I have so many notes. I don't know where to begin. So here it is. Is youth hockey seen as a negative sport in his view? He talks about in the book about outside evaluators. I had never heard of this. I have never heard that an organization would bring outside evaluators during the tryout process. Is it okay to have parents as coaches? And we talk about that. But I also want to get his inside. What is a misconception of being a full-time writer? So I had a little fun with that. But other than that, I am so excited that you're here. I'm so excited that you're going to be listening to this episode. And check Rich out. Check Rich Cohen out on LinkedIn or on his website. And you can obviously find his book on Amazon. But check him out, Rich Cohen. I was so nervous about this episode because, again, he's written for Rolling Stone. He's, I mean, like I said, this is what I want to be doing, what Rich is doing, and so I hope I still came across professional, asking Rich questions, and for 2021, I asked the guests the last question, and that is, if you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't? So I love asking that question because even though I'm someone in control, I want to know what I'm missing out. And I think it's a great way, even in the work environment, evaluating yourself. What can you do to improve? And that's why I like this question for 2021. I want to improve as somebody who just wants to have a conversation with my guests, but how can I get better? How can I be better as a podcast host, as a writer, as a blogger, as somebody who from time to time will post on videos. So that's where we're at. At the time of this recording, I have said to myself I need to start using Clubhouse. I have access to Clubhouse, so stay tuned for that. You might the website. Crap, I gotta get the website up and running too. Yeah, I got a lot to do. Anyway, I'm not gonna keep you any longer. Again, Rich Cohen, Pee-wee's Confessions of a Hockey Parent. Let me explain what Pee-wee's mean. If you're not familiar with that term, Pee-wee's means that the hockey players are under 12. Squirts are under 10. Then you have mites, which are under 8 years old. And then you have bantams, which are... It's been a long time. Because my son Connor, he plays U18, so he's a midget. And bantams are U16. There you go, U16. So... more information you probably needed. Anyway, thanks for coming by. Thanks for listening. Thanks for sharing this podcast. Thanks for supporting this podcast. I am so grateful. Every download, I am so grateful that somebody is listening to this. So, without further ado, as Terry Crews would say, your success is my success. Rich Cohen, Pee-wee's Confessions of a Hockey Parent. Of course, dog bark in the background, but it's all good.
Yeah.
Hey, I've already hit record, Rich. So if you're ready, I'm ready.
Yeah.
Before we talk about the book, there's two things I want to bring up, and number one is I was a huge fan of vinyl.
Oh, that's great.
Loved that show. I was really bummed it didn't make another season or more.
Me too.
Where did that concept come from?
Long time ago, Martin Scorsese and Mick Jagger talked about making a movie together because Scorsese had always used the Rolling Stones songs in his movies. If you go back, you'll see there's Rolling Stones songs in like half the movies. And Jagger insisted on seeing the movies before he sold the rights. And I'm thinking of the scene of, I think it's Jumping Jack Flash in Mean Streets, but it might be another song. And so in that way, they became kind of friendly and they talked about doing this together. And then they wanted to do something about the music business. Like Casino said in the music business, this is how it started. And it just so happened that I'd written my first book, which is about Jewish gangsters, and Scorsese read it in galleys and really liked it. And then I'd also written a big story for Rolling Stone about the music business. And I'd also written a couple stories about the Rolling Stones and sort of gone on tour with them. So I knew I was like connected to everything. And I was very young. So I knew Jagger and I knew Scorsese knew my book, and then I met with them and we talked about it, and I sort of told them how I thought it should go, and then just started and evolved from there.
Wow. Like I said, Rich, I come from a radio background. I worked 10 years in radio, and vinyl really spoke to me because of understanding a little bit of the record business because it correlated with the radio business. So again, Rich, I was so devastated when they announced that there wasn't going to be any more vinyl. But I want to let you know you have a fan in vinyl.
That's good.
What's one misconception of being a full-time writer?
Well, I think when you tell people you're a writer, they assume that you're kind of unemployed, like you don't really do anything. But I feel like, I feel like I work very hard because there's no travel time really. It's all work, The good thing is you save a lot of time because if you write for like 3 hours, that's like a lot of writing time, It's like not like, if you think about when you take a test in school, think about 3 hours of writing essays that's like writing. Because I used to, once upon a time, I worked in an office and, I spend most of my time just screwing around. I wouldn't really work at all. Actually, it was a writing job, but I would usually come home at night and have to write my stories at home at night because I was having too much fun at work, goofing around. So I think that the misconception is that it's not like having a real job,
right?
When it is. I mean, for me, it is. Maybe for other people, it isn't. I mean, it's just very regular and, kind of boring life, except when you're reporting, that's kind of not boring, but the writing part's pretty boring. That's why there's never really been a good movie about a writer, because the actual writing process is just somebody sitting at a desk saying nothing. It's not very interesting.
Right. I don't know. What was that movie? Was it Sideways about um, what's his name? Drawing a blank.
The wine, right?
The Wine. Yeah,
thing?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because he was trying to publish his big book.
Yeah, but the whole movie wasn't about him writing. It was about him getting drunk in Napa Valley. It was not about writing.
Right.
Like, at least if it's about a painter, which is there really aren't any good movies about painters either, for the similar reason, but because most of what's going on is going on inside the person's head. Mm-hmm. But at least if it's about a painter, you can actually show them painting something. Like, you can't really show anybody writing. Like, in a way, the best movie about a writer might be Barton Fink. You know that movie?
Right. Yeah.
So, and that's, I think you actually see him writing, and that's pretty good. That's the best, I think. But you see a lot of other stuff too.
Well, maybe this could be the next thing you sell to HBO.
Yeah.
Well, you and I have a lot of similarity. Both Cub fans, both Bear fans, definitely both Blackhawk fans. I grew up in Highland Park. You grew up in Deerfield.
No, I actually grew up in Glencoe.
Okay. But you played,
I played hockey in Deerfield. We lived in Libertyville, but then we moved. So I continued to play for Deerfield after we moved. Because Glencoe didn't have a team.
Really?
We had
even back then?
We had a house league, a very good house league, because we had an outdoor rink. We had no indoor rink. They still have the same outdoor rink, which is called Watts. So if you wanted to play travel hockey in Glencoe, which I did too, you went to Winnetka. That was the closest.
Okay.
And we went to Deerfield just because that's where I'd already played and knew people and everything.
Well, I lived in Vernon Hills
yeah,
as well.
And Highland Park, I think, and Deerfield now have one team, but they had their own teams, actually.
Was that the Falcons back in the day?
Yeah.
And
Highland Park, I don't know if they had I don't remember playing travel hockey there, but I remember taking lessons there and skating there. And my brother was a skating and free skate, guard there. That was like a big deal then.
Wow.
Good job.
Yeah. Let's see. Played youth baseball down at Sunset Park.
In Glencoe?
No, in Highland Park.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure I know it. I played at every field in Highland Park. I don't remember the names so much. And they changed the names too. Like, our local field where we played as little kids is now Jerry Reinsdorf Park.
Okay.
Because he paid a bunch of money to fix it up. Well,
it would be hard as a Cub fan to play there.
Yeah. Well, it would be different if the White Sox were dominant. They've been very good very often.
That's true. So your new book, Pee-wee's Confessions of a Hockey Parent. What was the breaking point? Why was it at your son, Micah? Is that right? Micah, what was the breaking point at Pee-wee's? Pee-wees are under 12. So what was your breaking point, Rich, to write this book?
Well, I thought about writing it before then, even when he was a squirt, mostly because the experience was so intense, because I cared about it more than I cared about just about anything else going on in my life, because the material is so great, and at the core, it's a sports story. And the tryouts and the way the teams were selected seemed to me to mirror so much of what was wrong about everything else in America, and the good, and the teams were the good and the tryouts were kind of the bad. And so I actually talked to my editor about this, and I was all set to do it. And then while I was working on other stuff, this Pee-wee season happened. And it was just such a crazy, great, dramatic season that I just changed the name of the book from Squirts, its original title, to Pee-wee's. And I wrote about the Pee-wee season instead of the squirt season.
What type of backlash have you received from other parents from the book?
None. I mean, maybe people are pissed off at me in my town, but I haven't heard from anybody who has. I've only gotten very, very positive responses. It could be the people that feel negatively about it aren't saying anything. I actually I got a great letter from one of the members of the board at this time who said, it's hard for me to see this without seeing it through the eyes of a double A player, because my son was on the single A team, and a member of the board, but everything you said is absolutely true. So everybody who was there knows that all this stuff happened. It's just, I'm just writing about what happened in our lives. And it was, because that's what I do. I'm a writer. So
Right.
um, it's been fine. I mean, it's been good though, because I think there's a lot of things people think and would like to say, but they don't say them. That's one of the satisfactions and uses of writing, which is if somebody says something that either you can't bring yourself to say, or that you feel but you haven't put into words, it's very satisfying to see it said in words, seeing it described, given a name.
Do you think that, because my son plays hockey, my son has played travel. This year he's playing both house and high school. I've gone through very similar scenarios as you have, being that parent, going through those tryouts, you know, biting my nails, going, why did that kid make it? And why didn't that kid make it? But overall, do you feel that youth hockey has more of a negative than other sports, other youth sports?
No, I don't think so. But first of all, I don't really know, because my son never played lacrosse. I don't know about lacrosse, which I'm sure is very intense. And see, the thing is, hockey is a great sport,
Yes, it
and
is.
it's a very intense sport. And hockey, young kids like kids who are 10 years old playing baseball, that just doesn't resemble the baseball they're going to be playing in 5-6 years. Just a different game, and it's hard to care about. Really, it's hard to get into as a parent. And basketball, if you watch little kids play basketball, it's just a different game than basketball is going to become. And same with football. Hockey's just hockey. So there's, in addition to all the stress of tryouts and all that, there's also the stress of the season, of how exciting it is. And you get stressed out about it in the same way you get stressed out about it as a Cubs fan. You get very into the games, and the greatness of the game, and the fact that the sport's growing, and that there's this incredible growth in different teams, different levels, and there's so many different levels. All that, the other side of that is stress for parents. And, there's an industry in the whole world, the way the economy works, and a lot of times is, stress is created by somebody, and then somebody else, or maybe not even somebody else, then offers you for a price to alleviate your stress. So they make you feel like you have a disease, and then they offer you a medicine for it, and there's a whole industry around hockey too, which is private lessons, camps, and all that. All that benefits from the stress, if you think about it, because you want to alleviate the stress, and you do that by giving your kid the best shot, which means preparing your kid more than other kids, which means spending more and more time. It's like an arms race, So I think it's a better sport than other sports for kids, and I think it's growing really fast, and I think that in that way it is different. Baseball, I feel like, at least around here, my son plays baseball too. There's fewer and fewer kids playing the team. There's fewer teams. There's not more teams.
So in your book, you mentioned one parent. I don't know if I'm going to get this last name right, but Blake Andren.
Uh-huh.
And you're talking about in your book not watching tryouts. It is such and you do talk about it in the book. Tryouts for youth hockey is very political. And the best example I can give you is, the association where my son plays. A couple years ago, when they were going through tryouts, the hockey director said, if you don't think teams are already created, you're all dead wrong. Where is, I guess, where is the fairness of putting it out there on the ice, putting it out there, on the field versus who has, as you put in your book, who has more political power or who has more financial power. What has happened to youth sports of just letting the kids go out, have fun, and make teams on their merits versus what you mentioned in the book, and I had never heard of this, where they had outside
Yeah.
evaluators.
Well, that's a common thing here, and the outside evaluators. And it's basically, I don't know the whole history of it, but I'd imagine that the outside evaluators come as a result of incidents where parents are complaining that it's corrupt and crooked. So they bring these people in, and when they say it's corrupt and your kid and not my kid, and my kid's better than your kid, they can say, hey, we didn't make this decision. It was made by these other people that are completely objective. But the outside evaluators are really a screen, I think. I mean, basically, first of all, if you just take the outside evaluators on their own as what they say they are, they're going to objectively judge. The problem is they only judge what they can measure, and there's only a few things you can measure in hockey. And so you can measure the kids that maybe have the best turns and are maybe the fastest, but you can't measure the kids who are the best hockey players. And by the way, this goes all the way up to, pro sports with the NFL Combine. You can't measure. That's why the Bears got Mitch Trubisky, because the things that they can measure, he was good at.
Right.
The things you can't measure, which turn out to be the only things that really matter, or, once you get to a certain level, he doesn't have any of those things, all those intangibles. Same with youth sports. You don't really know who the hockey players are until you're in a 6-game tournament and it's game 5 and you're losing in the third period and half the players have quit, and half the kids are still tussling. So, and then as far as, I agree with you, it's like the movie Miracle when all those kids show up and they find out this guy's already picked the team.
Yeah.
So what are we doing here? But by the way, so why is hockey like that? It's not just hockey. My older son is right now applying to college, and let's say a college has 1,000 kids going, 1,000 kid freshman class, but then you start looking at it honestly. Well, how many spots are really open here? You have a certain number of kids who are athletes, a certain number of kids who are exchange students who are going to pay more that the school has to have, certain number of legacies. And once you start subtracting all that, you're left with 1,000-person class, but there's maybe 100 spots. That's all. 1 in 10 spots are actually open. And it's the same with the hockey team. So if they have 15 spots, maybe your kid's playing for 3 or 4 spots. And, so the good thing about that is, I always said to my son in different seasons, not even this season, look, we're not in the loop here. I'm not on the board. I'm not one of the parents people care about. I'm a writer. They think I'm basically an unemployed person. Okay.
Right.
So basically what that means is every time you get on the ice, you got to do something. You've got to basically force them to play you. And that's been a benefit. The bad part about it is, and this is what happened this past season is, and I said all this to them, which is when the system is like this, you wind up, the teams are wrong. So you have 4 teams, but the top team, it doesn't have the best players on it. It has some of the best players on it, but some of the best players haven't made the team because maybe everybody hates their mom, or whatever the reason is. So basically you can tell the parents, this kid goes here, this kid goes there, but the kids all know who the best players are. And when the top team doesn't have the top players, it bothers the kids on the top team because they just want to play with the top players. And then even if your kid ends up on the top team but isn't a very good player, then it's no good for your kid because they need to play with people that can play with them so they can develop as players. This is what's happened. I've seen it happen again and again. So when that starts to happen, the top players on the top team start to leave and go to other teams because the team's no good and they want to win. And so this season I wrote about, we ended up with a number 2 team that I think was better than the number 1 team for a whole bunch of different reasons. And that's kind of what the book was about, so I don't know. It's just, I have found that there's organizations that are run not by the parents, but are run more professionally. And those teams tend to be better. It tends to be a different experience.
Well, something you talk about is the world of parent coaches, and you're not a fan of parents being coaches.
Well, I mean, I understand why there are parent coaches because they want to have three people on the bench, and they just don't have the money to hire three people per team, or they don't want to spend the money doing that. And the idea of the parent coaches is fine in our organization, which is there's a head coach who's being paid, who has no horse in the race, and just wants to do what's best for the team. And then you have two parents who are just on the bench helping out, organizing kids, opening, closing doors, helping run practices. But see, that's not what happens. What happens is the parents are giving all their time because they want to make the experience best for their kids, and they want to develop their kids as players, which means that they want to rejigger the whole thing so their kids play more than everybody else. Every parent knows this. So now these people are not bad people, they're good people. So in their mind, they have to say, the reason why I want my kid to play more than everyone else is not because I'm trying to get an advantage, but because my kid's better than everybody else. They just come to believe that. And in some cases it's true, and in some cases it isn't true. And one thing I've learned from this experience is nobody can be objective about their own kid. Everybody thinks their kid is the best player or the worst player. Very few people can make an accurate, examination of their kid and where their kid is, which is probably in the middle. Now, I do think that when I was growing up playing in Deerfield, and we had parent coaches, that people were a little bit more cynical about other people in a way, or I don't know if that's the right word, but maybe a little bit more sheepish about appearing to take advantage. So the parent coaches would tend to overcompensate by actually shafting their kids. So I played on a lot of teams with parent coaches. Like in baseball, you really saw it where you'd have this kid, it was a coach's kid, he was the best player on the team, he was playing right field and batting ninth. And that's because the father didn't want anybody to say you're treating your kid differently than you're treating everybody else. And people didn't want their parents to coach because they would not get to play very much. Now that's a different thing altogether, where the parents, the kid almost always has a very good spot on the team. So I just think that, it's just human. All this stuff, none of this stuff is unique to hockey. It's just, it's like the people who are at the rink are the same people who are doing everything else. So everything that's good and bad about America as a society is going to be at the hockey rink, because it's just another part of the same big pool. If that makes sense.
Makes sense. Well, I got into coaching because I was divorced. I wanted to, selfishly spend more time with my son, and so that's why I got into coaching, was to just spend time with my son. And he was starting to figure out that he wanted to just be a goalie. He didn't want to skate out, and luckily for me, I'm a goalie, so I went to the head coach and I said, "Do you need a goalie coach?" And that's how I got into coaching. And then the following season, they made me a head coach. I'm like, "You guys are stupid," because I am not, qualified to be a head coach. It was one of those situations where they needed bodies. And so that's why, I understand where you're coming from when it comes to the parent coaching, but we don't get paid. I mean, I have never been paid, but you get to the point, Rich, where you're just shorthanded to find coaches. And so, yeah, you're going to get those parent coaches. You're going to get those parent coaches who can't skate, who have never played, but they want to be part of the organization. They want to be part of, a team. So I see the good and bad, but until, you can pay, coaches, not a salary per se, but, a little bit of a stipend maybe, it might take out some of the process of those tryouts and putting together fair teams.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with parent coaches. I mean, it's always going to be, and and if you have a really good, strong coach, then it doesn't even matter. I'm just describing this reality that you can't be objective about your own kid, and there's no way to be objective about any of this stuff. And there's when you're looking at a tryout, I think one thing that is different from growing up is, the tryouts here, maybe it's different in Colorado, but here they're in the spring. So we always had tryouts in the fall. And the reason why that's a problem is because we have these teams, when it works, the teams are great and they gel and the kids gel, and you have this real sense of family, not just of the players, but of the parents. I mean, you're with these people all the time and they become your very close friends. But then everybody's so focused on who's going to make the top team next year and who's going to not make it, who's going to be left behind, that as the tryouts start to approach, you can almost feel it like coming near a big planet, like the gravity of it starts pulling on everybody. And so while the team should be at its peak moment of teamness, everyone starts to get pulled apart because all the players who are teammates and all the parents who are the parents of the teammates start to focus less on the team and more on their kid and who's going to make it and who's going to not. And it's a lot of stress. And then everybody's, you have situations where people start having meetings. Only half the parents who think their kids are going to make the next team have the meetings. And then there's like a lot riding on which team your kid's on, because that also determines who you hang out with. And the parents of the best players get treated better by other parents. It's like a status thing and all that. And I think one solution to that would be, now I understand why they don't do it. It's really an economic reason, but one solution would be having the tryouts like they used to have them in the fall. So you can finish a season and then move and close that chapter. And then the next season will come, instead of the next season sort of beginning before the last season's fully ended, if that makes sense. Everyone's already going to these clinics to prepare for the tryouts before the season even ends, and then other things happen, which is over the summer, which is people grow 4 inches or players develop at different levels. And I would also do my best to try to keep teams together if at all possible, because sometimes the difference between these players' skill level is great, but sometimes it's very minuscule, and the tryout really is just like a snapshot. So you're just getting a picture in time and things change very quickly.
I totally agree with you, Rich, on that point about keeping the teams together. I really wish, because I know with the governing body here in Colorado, they put the kibosh on that. There were a couple of organizations, and that's how they developed their kids. The kids stayed together, going from mites to peewees to squirts and up and up and up. And it was sad because I remember we played against that team, that organization, and oh my gosh, Rich, the kids, it goes from the coaching down. The coaches were just phenomenal people, because even there was one game we were just getting blown out, and they number one, they stopped scoring. Number two, they just would pass more, and number three, they switched forwards to defense, to make it a little bit fair. And after the game, each and every one of those kids looked at you in the eye and said, "Good game." And I talked to the coaches, and that's what they said. They had developed these kids from early on where they were able to keep them together. And like you said, hockey season, even at the youth level, it's almost 6 months, and
Yeah.
you develop relationships, not just the kids, but like you said, as parents. And there are certain parents that you don't mind having a beer with, and there's some parents, I'll admit, as a goalie dad, I'm a little different. I'm way out there, but it is nice to have the ability to develop relationships, because a lot of these kids, they get the opportunity to stay together, and then throughout life, those could be lifelong friends. So I agree. I really wish there was the ability to keep the kids together. But one other thing I worked at here in Colorado years ago, I worked at one of the local hockey rinks, and for tryouts, they did not allow parents into the building. We actually
Right.
had to put curtains up to keep any parents that, snuck in, so they could not see what was going on the ice.
It's definitely a good idea. I mean, I've seen, somebody told me about in Winnetka, where I grew, Winnetka, that they actually put like paper up, like they cover the plexiglass. And we got another chat around here where the parents were, well, the problem was that there's like a restaurant that you could oversee the rink from. So everyone was crammed in there, but they tried to keep them out of the area where the rink was. So I do think that that's definitely, I mean, that would solve one problem. The problem is I understand, like with sympathy, every solution you make, you can anticipate the other problem. So like if you kept the teams together, then it's going to be very hard for any new kid to make a team, or any kid that's improved to make a team, like, because the team's already set before the year. I understand why somebody would say that they don't like that. I mean, I think that the way they select the teams it's political, and also the differences are small, and the benefits to keeping kids together so outweighs, and one of the big problems we have here is the programs, kids leave the program. So the programs really need the kids to play, but there's not a lot of loyalty to the programs. And the reason is because a lot of the programs the kids don't feel they show loyalty on the other end. So everybody becomes like a free agent. Like kids want to go to the best team they can make, no matter where it is, and the teams want the best players they can get, no matter where they come from. So you get this kind of like almost freelance, and every year kids are jumping, here, because there's so many teams around here, and they're all different levels. And the problem with and here's one other thing that would be a great thing, I think. There's so many teams around where I live in Connecticut, and there's so many rinks, and there's so many good programs and so many good hockey players, that you could set up a league where you play just teams within a 30-minute drive. And you could play 6 teams, and you could play each team 10 times, and you develop these very intense rivalries with these teams, which would create loyalty in the kids. And all the time when you're driving in the car 5 hours to go to a hockey game, you could be playing hockey. Your kid could be playing hockey, or doing something else. And the other thing is, another thing that stresses parents out is, if for some reason, let's say you drive to a game that's 5 hours away, which we've done, and your kid did something stupid, like let's say during warm-ups outside threw an acorn at a chipmunk, and this angered the coach, and the coach said, "You can't play today." Okay, the parent is sitting in the stands seeing that this kid is benched, no idea why, and it's thinking, I'm going to drive 10 hours today to sit here and watch my kid sit on the bench. And that creates all kinds of problems. And I think all that would be relieved if there was not as much travel in it, And I really feel like the original reason we had all the traveling back in my time was because there just weren't as many kids playing hockey. So to get to the kids that had, the same skill level, you had to drive. You had to drive to Cleveland Heights, Ohio, And I just think outside of tournaments, which are different, where you get a whole bunch of games, the one-off games where you travel really far, I'm always confused by that.
Yeah, a year ago we were in Arizona. Yeah, Arizona for a tournament, and we played one Canadian team, and they should not have been in our division. And one of the kids decided to use my son as a cushion and took my son out. So I understand, again, tournaments should be fun, but that also needs to be a level playing field as well, in my view.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to judge, and you're going to some degree on faith, trust.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing that they do here is, they have an algorithm to determine where you're ranked in the state. And there's a way to play the algorithm that's screwed up. I mean, so like the team we play on, you lose every game of the year, and then you're like ranked number 10 in the state,
Yeah.
and you're in the playoffs, and you're like, I don't get it, and then you realize that, okay, so the reason is we only play top 10 teams all year, because if we even beat a team below us, we could go down in the rankings, as opposed to if we lose a team above us, we go up in the rankings. This is like math again, so but the experience for the kids are not, we've just only lost by 2 goals to the number 2 team. The experience for the kids is we just lost and we never have won a game, and the coaches are all happy or whatever because you're ranked number 10 because of the algorithm. And then you get this other weird thing where somehow you have to play a team that's ranked 10 spots below you, and the coach says you have to win by at least 5 goals.
Right.
Or you go down in the algorithm. So now it's something that you're always taught. Like you said, you like that other team because they didn't run up the score. Now your coaches feel obligated, though they might not like it, to tell the kids on the team, you have to keep pouring it on and humiliating these people because we need the goals for the algorithm.
And in those situations too, because the coach is going to say that, beginning of the game, the kids are going to be so focused on trying to score, and they're going to forget the basics because all they're focused on, we have to have, 5 goals or more, to advance. And it's a mind game, unfortunately.
Right. But again, it's another unintended consequence, because when they set up the algorithm, it seemed like, oh, this is a good, fair way to do it. And how are you going to rank teams? But then they didn't, unintended consequence, which is you can game the algorithm. And and now once other teams start to do it, you have to do it. Otherwise your team is not going to have fewer games ultimately, because they're not going to play in these tournaments at the end of the year. So the guy who becomes, or the man or the woman who becomes the most important part of your team isn't the coach and isn't the players, it's the scheduler.
Right.
Because, like you have a genius scheduler who's like a computer programmer, you can do really well just by the way the schedule is set up for the algorithm.
I'm trying to find, there was a portion in your book, you said that kids are dumb.
Right, because what I mean is, like, all the stuff we're taught for my kid, all the stuff we're talking about, he didn't care. He just loves to play hockey.
Right.
And the stuff that would upset me about how he was being treated or whatever, which I really feel he wasn't being treated right at various times, when I would get upset about it, and I would get caught up in it stupidly. And the thing is, you go in there intending not to, but then you just get caught up like everything else. And then I would turn to him and I'd say, why don't you care? And he'd say, I don't know. I just like to play hockey. I don't really care where they play me. I don't care what line I'm on, just as long as I'm playing hockey. What do I care?
Right.
And you realize that that's actually the right, and that I'm sort of jokingly saying that's stupid. It's actually smart, but it's like, you know what I mean? Like, he's not focused on everything. He's just focused on the one thing, I mean, he wants to play with kids he likes. He wants to play as well as he can, and he wants to play, and that's it. He didn't even care what position he plays, really.
As long as he's playing.
We had a game last week where he played every shift. He was on a different position. It was crazy. I'm like, how do you even remember where you're supposed to be? Center, right wing, left wing, defense, right defense, left, everything but goalie.
Mm-hmm. What did you learn as a parent after writing this book?
I learned that really none of this stuff really matters ultimately. I mean, there's a moment that happens for everybody whose kid plays hockey. Maybe it's different for a goalie parent, actually, where your kid gets like laid out and is lying there on the ice and looks like they can't move. And everybody takes a knee, and you remember that only one thing matters, that your kid is okay.
Yeah.
And suddenly you don't care about any of the other stuff. All the other stuff you're obsessing about, ice time, teams, all of a sudden you realize that you feel stupid, that stuff was stupid, and all you want is for your kid to be healthy and have a good experience. And then once you get started going again, you forget that, but it's just good to try to remember that. And that's, I think, what I learned, which is there's really only one thing that matters here. There's a line in a Neil Young song I'd always think of, which he goes, I was in a hurry, but that doesn't matter now. You know, as soon as someone gets sick, you immediately remember your priorities, but you lose them in the heat of the moment.
My son said to me this past weekend, he had his own little, because he turns 18 next month. He had his own little aha moment going, oh my gosh, I've been playing hockey for this association for 11 years. And I told him, I said, dude, if you think these 11 years have gone by fast, when you go to college, those 4 years are going by even quicker.
Yeah. But you don't realize it when it's happening,
Exactly.
you know.
What
So
li-
that's what I
what life lessons has Micah learned?
um well, not from, you mean from hockey itself?
Yes.
I think, I mean, who can say for sure, because I don't know what he'd be like if he didn't play hockey, but I think I think hockey's made him a better person.
In what
I mean,
sense?
he's more, well, you realize when you play hockey, especially when it gets better, that you can't do these things. No matter how good you are or how good you think you are, there is somebody that's better, somebody that's bigger, somebody that's faster. Okay. And you realize that you can't really win these games without your teammates, without making them better. You learn that sometimes the best play is the invisible play.
Mm.
And I really like the way that he stands up for he's not a big kid, but when his teammates are getting pushed around, he always stands up for them. He's always a lot of empathy, a lot of care for the team. And this idea that there are things that he can do, that he's not going to do for the good of the team. Like he can sublimate his own ego to the team and playing a role in a team, you know? I just think that that's all really comes out of sports. And also things like playing when you don't feel great, figuring out a way to contribute even when you're having an off day, playing when you're hurt, gutting through things, you know, all that stuff, playing in pressure situations. Actually, the biggest pressure situation he had in the Little League game, they were in the championship here. He had a great coach, like the best coach. And he wasn't a pitcher, but he was small, but he pitched sometimes. And they ran out of pitchers, basically. There's like a pitch limit. And
Mm-hmm.
they had bases loaded and they were winning by 1 run. And they bring him in with with 1 out, bases loaded. And it's a point where they're going to win the championship and all the kids have forgotten how to make a play because they're all so nervous. Like they're letting
Right.
balls drop, like stuff they'd normally no problem. They're all, and like they don't want anything to do with the ball. You know what I mean? And they bring him into this. I'm like, this is so unfair. I'm thinking, like, can you imagine being brought into this situation? Bases loaded, 1 out, 1 run lead, and all of a sudden your players are afraid to touch the ball. And he won the game. I mean, he struck out 2 batters. And the coach said to him, you will never in your whole life be under more pressure than you were just now. I don't care if you work in a Fortune 500 company and there's a merger. That's as much pressure as you'll ever be under. But that's the thing, like being under pressure. All that stuff's in sports. And just getting out of the house. And I also think, like around here, the travel part in that way is good. One is it's really, really fun. It's a big bonding thing. You do get to spend a lot of time with your kid. And he gets to see a whole different parts of the state, from people that have a lot more money to people that have a lot less money, and he's with them all out on the ice. And I think on all that, it's been a broadening and a great experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think extracurricular activities are so important in kids' development. I mean, I don't care if it's sports, band, theater. Kids need those outside of school activities to help develop them and help, create life skills, for their future.
Yeah, and it's always good to know that you've sort of been in a tough situation and you perform well. That's something you take with yourself everywhere.
Well, I'll tell you, the pressure situation my son faced was Monday. We were in the semifinals going into the It was tied 0-0 going into the overtime. And the coolest thing was before they dropped the puck for overtime, my son got all the kids together that were on that line and told them, hey, this is 4-on-4. You have more ice, take advantage of it. And that was one of those proud dad moments when, you see the leadership in action right then and there. And from there, they end up going into a shootout, which I was fine with. One of my friends said, how stressed are you? I'm like, I'm okay, because I know he's good on breakaways. He's good on shootouts. And yeah, they did win and then got crushed in the championship. But I owe so much to sports for him, because he especially this season, having great coaching, having great mentorship to again show leadership in action. And it wouldn't, again, like you were saying, Rich, without sports, I don't think our kids can develop without having that for their life.
I agree. It's really great. It's been great during this time too, especially just to get out and exercise.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
I want to honor your time, Rich. Again, I greatly appreciate you taking the time and being on the podcast. How can people get the new book?
You can just get it on Amazon, or go to my website, which is authorrichcohen.com, which would link you to everything else. But you could also just go on Amazon.
Last question before I let you go, Rich. If you could step into my shoes, or in this case, skates, what would you have asked yourself that I didn't ask?
That's a tough question. I don't know. Like, I guess what's the biggest mistake hockey parents make in all this? I feel like my older son played, and it's really good to have, like, if you did a statistical study, you'd probably find that second and third kids have better hockey careers because he's the first kid to figure out how the whole thing works.
Mm-hmm.
You got to navigate the system. And I don't just mean the politics of it. I mean, just like, like one of the big mistakes that I think parents make is this idea that the more you play, the better you are necessarily. I mean, I think the kids need breaks, just like adults do. And I see a lot of situations where people have their kids play all year round. And like, we go away for the summer. I mean, he plays in the spring, so it plays in winter. It's already like August to March or whatever, and then plays until like June. And then we leave completely, from just hang up the skates. And when you come back to it, there are kids you realize when you left, they were at the rink. When you get back, they're still at the rink. And you're like, it's like if you like left work at 6 o'clock, came back, and there's a guy that's been there all night. And it's like the guy's just ground down to dust, like you need a break, you need a refresher. And so it's counterproductive, because my kid, or the kids that are away, always come out with incredible jump and excitement because they can't wait to get back on the ice and play. And these kids just are like, they just want to do anything else. And kids burn out. And the most important thing for a hockey player development and being good is like that they love to play. Because as soon as they don't want to play, it's over. Can't really make them play.
That was my biggest concern as a coach, was that having kids quit. And I'm very fortunate that none of the kids that I ever coached quit. But yeah, that was.
Well, that has a lot to do with the coach. So good for you.
Yeah,
And I mean,
yeah.
I think it has to do with the coach and the parents. In one way is you withhold hockey from a little bit now and then, I remember this. I put it in the book, the story about Pete Maravich's father wouldn't let him play basketball when he was a little kid for a few years.
Right.
Until he was just dying to play, as opposed to turning a game into work. Like the game part of it, you see it like with coaches that run, he's had coaches that run fun practices and coaches that run practices as just no fun, and they don't want to go. I mean, you need some mix.
Yes.
But you need to disguise the skill building as games.
Yep. As fun games.
Yeah. So then they really want to go. And they'll play a lot more, and they'll play a lot better. When you just turn it into a slog, it's just so that's what I'd say, like, which is give them a break and keep it fun. And they'll be, and my other big lesson in life as a parent, maybe you forget that, is like, don't have as much control as you think you do. I mean,
Yeah.
mostly it's your kid's going to do what your kid's going to do. Like, I tried to get my older kid to play hockey. He just didn't like it. He liked other stuff. And once I realized I can't make him like this game, that's stupid. Then and then I let him do what he wanted. You know, like, they're basically pre-wired to do what they want to do. And basically all you can do is sort of help, feed it, clear obstacles, get out of the way.
Exactly. Well, Rich Cohen, Chicago Cub fan, Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, Pee-wee's Confessions of a Hockey Parent. Rich, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your time today.
Yeah, good luck with the rest of your hockey season.
Oh,
Good luck to your son.
Thank you. And you as well. And hopefully your book will help more youth organizations be wiser.
Oh, thanks a lot. And good luck with everything.
Pick up my new book at mydadsadvicebook.com. That's mydadsadvicebook.com. Hey, what's your favorite Arbor Day tradition?